Morning, everyone, and welcome to Leap Junction's Leap Talks. This one's in partnership with MIA to talk about your band as your business. And I just want to tell you all a little bit about Leap Talk, or Leap Junction. Some of you may know about us. So we run entrepreneurial services here on campus. We're here to help students who are interested in starting their own businesses or learning more about the entrepreneurial world and developing a culture of entrepreneurship here on campus. We run workshops, we run events, we do Leap Talks like this. We're tucked in across from the library in the students' lounge. There's a little office in there. You can come find us there. So we're happy to talk to any of you who are interested in moving forward. And I'm sure you're going to hear lots of great stuff today about these people who are doing some of their own stuff here in town, in this wonderful city that we have that offers so much around music. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Holly, who's going to be our facilitator today, and we'll introduce our panel members.
Maybe we should just start by applauding them for all coming today to give you some of their knowledge. See, a nice round of applause before you even say anything. How does that go? All right, I think I'm just going to start off right away by introducing sort of the formal bios of the people that are sitting before you today. Thank you all for coming and taking in some of the information that they have to share with you. I've got lots and lots of questions, so hopefully there's a lot of information that they can share from their different perspectives. But just to introduce them, I'll kind of go from right beside me all the way down to the end. So we've got Richard Gracious as the frontman of Mountain of Wolves, guitarist and keyboardist for Wolf Saga, and now co-owner of Forest City Records. Richard Gracious knows the stage and industry like the back of his hand. Years of extensive touring across Canada's landscape developed his signature rock and soul sound and how to captivate an audience with just a guitar and his voice. Reminiscent of early White Stripes, his music explores hard and heavy highs and sweet, soft lows. I wish we could hear some of those today. Richard reels audiences in with his music's intense vulnerability within an intimate and exposed setting. So please welcome Richard Gracious. I'm just going to make them clap for you as much as possible. Beside Richard, we have Savanah Sewell. Savanah is a community collaborator, music lover, and event organizer. For the past decade, she's locally been working on the Gricklegrass Festival, which I've been to a couple times. It's fantastic. Winter Spectacular, and most recently, the London Girls Rock Camp. She cut her teeth in the music production world, working backstage at Budweiser Gardens, the London Music Hall, and Air Canada Centre. Her travels have taken her to managing artist relations at Way Home Festival, Gentlemen of the Road, Digital Dreams, and the Toronto International Film Festival. And this summer, you can catch Sav running the family area at the Home County Music and Arts Festival and chasing after her biggest career accomplishment to date, her son Oda, who is unfortunately not here because I wanted to hold him while I did the panel. I was going to try that. So please welcome Savanah as well. Besides Savanah, we have Carly Thomas. Carly Thomas is an accomplished singer-songwriter born in Thailand and raised in Argentina, France, and various parts of North America. She's known as much for her powerful lyrics as her engaging live performance. Again, I'm so sad we don't get to actually see you folks do your thing today. Thomas has played everywhere from street festivals in Paris to the folk circuit in Manhattan, and in 2017 completed her first Euro tour in support of her current release, Explode. She is currently working on her fourth release, yet to be titled, and is continuously pushing the boundaries of folk pop. So please welcome Carly Thomas.
Thank you.
And last but not least, down at the end there, we have Cory Crossman. Cory is London's first music industry development officer. He is the liaison between the industry and City Hall. He's stepped into this role with experience in many areas of the music industry, including a vantage point as a touring artist, concert promoter, and mid-sized festival director. Short and sweet bio there, Cory. Thank you very much. Please welcome Cory Crossman.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get them to just sort of jump in here. I'm actually going to go down to the bottom. I've changed the way I thought in the shower this morning. I'm going to change the way we do things. So I kind of said who you are and what you do. That's a weird thing to say when this is being filmed. Anyway, I sort of said this is, you got to start off light. So I have introduced who you are, sort of the actual bios that you sent. I'd love if you told me why it is that you do what you do. And maybe if you have any tie to Leap Junction or to Fanshawe, you can mention that as well. But we've heard what you do, so why do you do what you do?
I guess I'm starting.
That's
okay.
you.
Yeah, I've just always loved music. Grew up in a household where music was really supported. Started playing things like piano and Later moved to drums, trombone, and then I think it really sort of hit my stride when I found guitar. And then you just get to sort of see a different world. And, sort of going to my first concert kind of thing, I just sort of fell in love with it. Like, wow, that's unbelievable that someone gets to tour the world and do that. So, right off the hop, it was kind of, this is an amazing thing, let's get excited about it. I was playing in a band all through high school, we were doing fairly well. We had a management deal. We were just able to do like a 52-day US tour. And like any good band, we broke up. And actually it was a really good thing because it sort of introduced me to another side of things. And growing up with like DIY ethos in like a punk rock community, it was really about putting on our own shows. And that's sort of what opened the door for me, right? Sort of seeing a different side of the industry and a different side of music. And so I started promoting shows when I was like 14. I think we had like 700 and some odd people come out to our first show. Every band got paid like $1,000. It was, wow, this is an awesome business. I love it. The next show wasn't as good, and the third show was terrible, and I lost my shirt on it. So it was kind of, okay, so things operate in a 3-show cycle, and started figuring the business out. And then after that, my band broke up in high school. I started getting into promoting, and it was sort of a different side of it, and that led to starting a screen printing business with my brother, which has been fairly successful, working on all kinds of different concerts, but then leading to the creation of a festival. And that was sort of something that I loved the most. It was just great to see. We did like 161 bands performing over 2 days in Kitchener. And it was just incredible to turn spaces that didn't experience music into music venues. So that sort of always stuck with me. I guess a long-winded story, but yeah. It was just incredible the power that music has and how it draws people. So I tried to find a way to latch into the industry, and now I work for the city, supporting and developing the music community.
I know we've done these panels before where everybody's very polite and you kind of go in order. You don't have to do that. So however you want to, more like a conversation, less like a Q&A. But why is it that you do what you do?
I guess I can go. So it wasn't actually until I sat down to write a business plan 2 years ago that I figured out why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I'd always just done it and it felt so natural working behind the scenes. But I'm from a really small community in the eastern part of the province, and my parents were actually a part of a group of people who wrote a grant in the late 80s and bought an old church and converted it into a theater. And that theater still stands strong today, and my mom is actually really involved in the theater still today. And I grew up there. I grew up behind the stage, but also on the stage as well. But learned how to stage manage, learned how to work the lights. It's like little light boards like this big. Learned about blocking, stage right, stage left, all the things. But I didn't connect that for myself until, like I said, 2 years ago. So that's really where it began for me. In my earliest memories of being in this old church that looks very similar to this. Like it holds 80 people, it's very small. But it's been a big part of that community in Napanee, where I'm from. So I guess that's kind of where it started for me. Really involved in stuff all through high school from a theater perspective. But my background is actually broadcasting. I went to Fanshawe for broadcasting and worked in the industry and started to go to events, some good, some not very good. And you start to see the holes. You start to see, oh, I could do that, or I could do this. And once I graduated, there was a lot of really great creative people that I was around, and we just didn't see the things we wanted to see in London, Ontario. And so we just started doing them. So we started throwing shows in really random places, basically anywhere that they would let us. So that was sort of the beginning of it for us. Someone was a graphic design grad, someone was a PR grad, some of us were broadcast grads. So we just sort of used the tools that we had freshly from school and started knocking on doors, basically, in this community. So then we started Gricklegrass when I was 21. And this year is going into our 9th year of that festival, which is kind of crazy. So we do that at the Children's Museum in London. And that was sort of similar to Cory's thought, which is let's put music in places that it's not normally in. So that's kind of the theory there, is that let's turn the Children's Museum into a concert venue and get it licensed and put, 15 bands in there at night for us. It's a lot of fun. May 26th if you're around. But anyways, so why do I do what I do? I mean, it's in me. I didn't realize it was in me. I didn't recognize it was in me until I started to take a step back. I've had so many ups and downs and, so many doors in the face, so many no's. But for some reason, I just continue to do it because at the end of the day, I obviously love the industry. It's hard. It's difficult being a woman, not to call ourselves out. But especially in the production side, we hear a lot of this conversation about women musicians, and there's obviously tons of issues, but there's even another layer of women who decide to work behind the scenes. It's very, it's very difficult sometimes, but I've had to navigate that. I don't know, with all the negative things I'm saying, there's also a lot of positive, but I guess I continue to do it because at the end of the day, it's in me. Does that make sense? Long-winded?
Yes.
It does. Yeah.
That?
I also
Too many words?
No, I also love with the panelists how sometimes you answer many of the other questions I already have in the first question. That's okay, so we're good. Yeah, we can leave now. So I guess I'll give the other two of you a chance. Why is it that you do what you do from your standpoint?
Well, I sort of found that I started playing music at a young age. I come from a really musical family. My mom was a singer-songwriter, and she did a lot of work in Nashville when we were living in the States. I grew up, my childhood, we grew up all over the place. So I always found that I was always the new kid, and I always used music and writing as a way to sort of deal and get through that. I was always super shy, so for me, it was my way of connecting. And that stayed true throughout my whole life, as music is just a way to connect with people and create something meaningful. And I moved out to Vancouver. It was the first place that I spent sort of a good, over 3 years, I guess, was Vancouver. And I started playing in a band there, a couple bands, and just getting more into it. But for me, deciding that I wanted to live a creative life came a bit later. And then I came back to London, and the work that I've been doing here is sort of building roots in order to be able to go from there. So why I do it is, it sort of feels like something I have to do. I'm passionate about it, and I think it's completely possible to live a creative life, and I love touring because I love traveling, so it sort of feels natural for me. Yeah, I think that's why.
I saw you shaking your head, Richard.
Yeah, I get that. Why do I do this? Well, I was never a good student, and I used to work kind of it was a production factory for my parents' company, building thermocouples for 10 plus years, welding and silver soldering. You wouldn't do that for that much time. And then at the end of the day, you can go home, play some music. You're like, oh, I'd rather be doing this. But then after playing a couple shows to nobody, you're like, why am I still doing this? But you still do it, and that's when it kind of separates. Is this something I want to keep doing? And then you get some shows that are better than that, and you're like, okay, this could work. And then the best realization came when a couple years you look back on the past year, and you're like, whoa, I actually did some of my goals. I played some festivals I never thought I'd play. I played some shows that were pretty fun. I put out an album I actually like. Stuff like that, and you build up your little goals underneath you that you start realizing you're doing time after time, and that's how it just develops, and then eventually you can quit your day job, and then that's when you really have to start hustling. And so that's why I'm here now.
I like it. Well, and I see a lot of ties between, even just the answers of, I don't know, it's in me and I just feel like I have to do it, but then also that that theme of seeing some holes or seeing some things that I forget if it was Carly or Savanah who said this, but sort of seeing things maybe in the city that don't exist and being like, I could do that. I could fill that hole and be creating some stuff that could be really cool here. So I think I'm actually going to jump down to one of my later questions, but I think I wanted to just go with what you were saying in terms of A few of you had mentioned sort of collaboration or working with different people. So I just want to touch on that while we were chatting. So what is the value of sharing or networking or collaboration in the music industry? So here in the city or in the community or otherwise. So sometimes, not taking that everybody's my enemy and I just have to be better than everybody, but really taking that collaborative or networking approach. So what's the value of that, maybe specifically here in the City of London?
It's huge. You have to network, you have to go to shows, you have to meet people. 90% of the better gigs and opportunities you get are through a personal connection that you have. People aren't just going to hire your band because they see your band and your band's great. Play our festival. No, they want to know if you can work with them, if you have a long-standing history of being professionals. And so the more they know you, the more they're willing to work with you. And I can say most of my opportunities have come from networking and personal connections and having that face-to-face, especially in the music industry.
Yeah.
Totally.
People want to know that you take yourself seriously, I find, too, and that's an important way to get in there and just be persistent about things, but not too much, and just kind of show up. Another reason I thought about this was collaborating was because being a songwriter, a lot of what I do is alone, and a lot of what you do is sort of, because I manage myself and I do all my own bookings right now, unless I'm doing a tour, but it can be super lonely. So like getting out and being part of the community is huge for me, just to feel that there is like a bigger picture, there's like, I'm part of something.
Also, sorry. Well, because we're in 2018, Facebook likes and Instagram likes only go so far. Just because a band or an act or an artist or producer have all that following, you still don't know what they're worth, and half the time people suspect you're buying the likes and stuff. You've only played 5 shows and you have 1K likes. Just that stuff happens, and so then you become wary, and it really comes down to, do I want to work with this person because I know them, not because of their internet reputation.
I just go to social events and take everyone's phone and get them to like
Exactly.
me. I'm like, I'm just kidding.
Do you mind?
Comedy.
That's my Facebook page.
Well, I think like you guys sort of hit on that all, and sort of what Savanah said too, is that there's these big teams of people that want to work on things together, and I think in creative industries you don't succeed unless you're really out there working, connecting, and networking. I think I can say anything that I've done significant in my life to date, even outside of music, is relationship based. It's all relationship based, and I think that just in music more so, right? So I think it's a key thing to get out, volunteer, network, be at things, connect with people. You never know like who you're going to help or who's going to help you, kind of thing. So. I can't overstate the importance of that. Mm-hmm. And that anytime I do this kind of thing, and I talk, especially with students, I'm like, get out, volunteer, show up, just show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's so much to learn from people who are doing what you do or who are at different stages of their career too.
Exactly.
Like my first mentor, I guess you could say, was a guy that was a club owner that had like 0 time for me, and I'd show up every Friday morning at 9 a.m. and sit there, and he wouldn't even talk to me half the time, but I'd just sit there, and all these people were coming in, and I just thought, oh, this is kind of like what you have to do. And then a friend of mine was saying, why do you do that? And I was like, I don't know, I just, it's show up. I just show up, and I showed up and showed up and showed up, and it led to start getting me some gigs and stuff, and I started, selling some t-shirts for, whatever band or something like that. Then all of a sudden, I'm wrapping cables on stage, and then it led to some legitimate work, right? So I think just show up, step one.
Yeah, somebody said once that collaboration is the new competition. I kind of like that notion, that if we're not going to work together, nothing's going to happen. The opportunities in London and regionally in this community are vast. However, it is still a small community, so it is really important to manage relationships and be positive and, get out there and be social at the same time. But yeah, I can't agree with Cory more about showing up. This is why I'm here doing anything today. It's because I showed up. And even if I was, cleaning up a green room after some band destroyed it, and thinking, wow. No, his name was Tommy Lee. Anyways, it's like, wow, I can't believe I'm the person in this cycle. But now as a production person, someone that's totally obsessed with process, I can't go to a show or an event or anything and think about who's backstage cleaning up after Michael Bublé or whatever. Like, you know, it's just, it becomes what you do. But anyways, the point is that I find in the music industry, relationships have never been more important, especially in real time, especially face to face. I can cold call or cold email anybody, but if I don't have the...
If you don't have an in or someone, they're not going to... And also, it's a lot smaller than you think it is, the music community in Canada. You'll run into the same people over and over again at the same events, and...
Even in different countries.
It's ridiculous how small it is. And it starts at home, like here in London, same thing. We have this, there's so many bands, so many artists, but there's always the same people at the same shows and the same people doing the same things, right?
Even the roadies, like honestly, I work so many shows and I see the same guys. They're like, oh, I remember you from this show. You know, it's like, oh, there's only like 6 guys in the union apparently. Anyways,
to get all the gigs.
Canada, getting all the gigs. So it's, I don't know, it's way smaller than you think.
And I think those are some of the really important people. You know, people look at like, you know, the main singer of the group or something like that, and like everyone's flocking to that person. I'm not saying you're not going to learn a lot from them. You're going to learn a lot from those people that are in the trenches that are doing stuff. Those are the people that are going to pull favors for you, right?
Totally.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God, has anybody heard in this room, or Bill Graham, not the crazy pastor, but does anyone talk about Bill Graham, the concert promoter? Okay, do yourself a favor, everybody. He's my hero. He's Bill Graham. He's an asshole. I've met people who have worked for him, but as far as like the industry is concerned in the 60s and 70s, Bill Graham is he's amazing. What he did for music and what he did for touring musicians is amazing, and you should read about him. He's the best.
We might have to cut out the part where you just called him an asshole. But anyway.
He's very dead. He's very dead. So I think it's okay.
Other than that, I like where this conversation is going there.
You definitely say that after they're dead. I can say whatever I want.
You're good.
I'm not touching that.
I think I want to continue on with that thread of a new sort of saying community even here in London, and I think a lot of people, whether it's the music industry or other creative industries, you know, you're in the city of London, you think, oh my gosh, I have to get out of this city. I have to go to Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, because I cannot possibly do anything here in London.
I want to tackle that right off the top.
You can, so
That's all Cory.
yeah, so
life,
this is not actually a question on my sheet, but maybe, but I'm very, very passionate about this city and staying in this city. So if you want to tackle it, go for it.
Yeah, no, you don't have to do that, right? We're so close to the mega center, right? You don't need to be in Toronto every day doing everything. You can have a life, you can own a home, you can do everything you need to do in a city like London. And then you can go into the city when you need to, right? So I think when people make that argument that, oh no, I need to be in Toronto, I can't miss an opportunity, it's just calculated. Like, use your mind and understand how many nights you're actually going to go out in Toronto and where you need to be, right? And spend some time actually thinking about that. And then when you look at it and you step back, you don't need to be. You can make all these connections, you can make all these relationships. I look at a city like London last year at the Junos, we had 3 out of 5 engineers were London educated. 3 of the 5 nominees were London educated. There's no city in Canada that's doing that. So why would you leave a city that's doing that? And I think with all the programs that we have here, you know, it's a hub. All this stuff's already happening here, and it continuing to grow. And I look at stuff, you know, like what Richard's doing with his label. It's so important to be an entrepreneur nowadays, right? You need to be able to do everything. Those services are all here. And I look at, even when I was growing up as a high school kid, getting into things, and how do we sort of make things work? It was with networking, connecting. You know, I had a friend who was a photographer, started out taking pictures of bands. I started with local bands, and I started, you know, regional touring bands and national touring bands. Now the guy's never home because he's traveling all around the world taking pictures of craziest stuff. Another friend that was a concert promoter and a web developer. Now he's running the mobile division for Universal internationally. And this is just a dude that stuck it out, you know, in his hometown. So I think, you know, you make those connections, those people are going to help you take it to the next level, and you can do that in London.
100%.
You can 100% do it in London.
This is where you build a portfolio. Even if your plan is to leave eventually, which I'm a proponent of staying in London, but I also understand that you eventually have to leave and come back. But this is a place where you build your portfolio, and you have access. Like, you have access to, you know, the GMs of certain buildings, or you know, you can get an internship somewhere at a studio that's great here. You can get access to small business funding. You know, like you can get an arts grant. I mean, there's so many things that are so much more accessible here because you're in this regional place, as opposed to going to some of those major centers and trying to fight for the same, let's say, if we're specifically talking about grants, dollars, right? So like the arts funding is abundant in this country, but if you're in Toronto, you know, the competition is that much, you know, harder.
Small fish in the big pond.
Yeah, whereas
Yeah.
here, I can write a grant application and probably get it, and actually go have a meeting with the officer that's in charge of giving me the grant. Like, do you know what I mean? There's just so much more access here, and we have great business resources for small business here. The ecosystem here is phenomenal, and you have access to that. And you can just pick up the phone and set up a coffee with somebody, and you can have a coffee with somebody. Mm-hmm. It seems like it's a really it's a really accessible place, and you can really build a strong portfolio that's going to take you to the world, to the rest of the world. So many friends that have done that.
And that concept too, that, you know, build your portfolio, go out and come back. I think that really does a lot for you.
Totally.
And there's nothing wrong with stepping out for a little bit and coming back, but the idea is build your roots, you know, get to know, take that chance and stuff like that in a community that will support you.
Yeah. The resources are here for sure.
You know, actually talking about grants, I went to a Toronto Arts Council event, just trying to gauge, you know, because we had one coming up with the London Arts Council, trying to gauge how many people went to it. It was like, they were crammed into a venue like sardines. I was standing against the back wall like this. I couldn't hear the speakers. I couldn't connect with anybody. You know, I had already arranged to meet with 2 or 3 people over there. I already had like scheduled meetings, and there was just, you couldn't. Like, you absolutely could not. And it was not a knock against Toronto, but it's that much more fierce, that much more competitive. So, you know, build your legs up. You can do that here.
My partner is a touring musician who just got back from 2 weeks in Mexico, and you know, we own a house. We live in an old church. It was like super cheap. You know, he has a job. We have 2 vehicles. Like, I'm not trying to tell you. I'm not trying to be like, look at how fancy I am. I'm just telling you that I can afford that in London, Ontario. My friends that live in Toronto or Vancouver or even Montreal cannot do those things.
Yeah.
And they come. Touring musicians sleep on my floor constantly. And they're like, whoa, we can't believe you have space. And we're like, yeah, because we live here, and it's totally affordable, and that's great. Like,
And it's close enough to a lot of major centers,
Exactly.
that like Toronto, and you can drive a day to.
Yeah,
even
you can come home
Ottawa,
after a
Montreal.
gig.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
can come home after a gig in Toronto and sleep in your own bed.
You
and
get
not
home
sleep
at
on
4 a.m.,
someone's
but it's
floor.
not terrible.
Exactly. It's an easy drive at 4 a.m.
It's not bad at all. No, I would rather do that than find somewhere to crash in Toronto and pay
Yeah.
$12 for avocado toast there.
And potentially get your car towed.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, and
I've had
parking.
friends
Plus you got overnight
I've
park.
had friends like come out to get their vehicle like totally gone.
Oh, and your vehicle will get stolen.
Yeah.
All your gear
Yeah.
gone.
So
I know, Richard, you're a big fan of Toronto.
Yeah. Well, the main reason I started Forest City Records is because I was in the band, we're in the stage getting some label attention, and then booking agents and managers, and they're all in Toronto or Hamilton. And so we're shopping around these people. We got to go to meetings in Toronto. We got to go 2 hours every day. And then they're like, you can't meet them on a regular basis. I said, why am I outsourcing all this when we have all the resources in London? They just need to be put together a little more or streamlined. And so I started the label to try to pull those in. So now we work closely with like the Arts Council. There's projects like Downtown London. There's lots of little, then thankfully Leap starting us out. And so if you look in London, the resources are
They're
there.
here.
That's the main thing. A lot of people are too lazy, like, screw it, I'm just going to Toronto. Everything's easy there.
It seems like right now, too, is a really good time to be in London. Like, I didn't grow up in London at all, but coming back here and watching it, like, just so much progress has been happening with the spotlight being more on the music community and the arts community. And there's, I don't know, there's just so many outlets here now that, I don't know, like, I've found a lot of success in coming back here, and it was kind of by accident, too. And I was living out in Vancouver. I was very scattered. I was going to Toronto sometimes. And once I sort of focused and decided that this is where I can kind of grow more roots and get a lot more connected, it's just, yeah. I think right now it's a great place, especially with the London Music Office. And
It's
good timing.
I mean, you look across the country, it's really the best secondary market in Canada. You know, when people talk about the importance of secondary markets, it's secondary markets are sort of what makes Canada happen and what makes Canada's music economy happen. Otherwise,
The Junos are coming here.
The Junos are coming, you know.
Which leads me to my next question. I'm going to just jump in here. I love how you folks are just like jumping off each other. But so how does London hosting something as big as the Junos sort of affect that smaller business of music in the city? And how does that trickle down? So does it really support it? Does it overshadow it? How can people who are working in the music industry here in the city sort of align themselves to take as much advantage of something like the Junos coming to London as possible?
I think Savanah can chat on that a bit too, because she's part of the host committee. But the big piece is this is just elevating profile. This is just elevating opportunities. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, cool, the Junos, the biggest cultural event in Canada. It's an award show." No, it's more than an award show. It's 365 days of opportunities, and I'll really use that word opportunities because the entire music industry is going to be in London for a week.
Yeah.
Like,
I think
that
we had
is
3,000 people come into Vancouver just for it.
just for it,
And
right?
so
Like,
you got, and then the full
And
Juno
ask for
week.
so many people's phones.
Exactly. Give me those lights.
just think of your light counts because they go way up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and think about us. This comes back to where we are geographically. We're in such a, I think, greater advantage to having the Junos here because there's going to be even more. I think there's going to be more people here
Yeah.
because it's so much easier to drive here from Toronto or Hamilton or
Montreal, even people are
Yeah.
just going to be coming in, and then
as
from the
opposed to
States.
hopping on a flight and flying for 5 hours.
So how does somebody who maybe isn't quite as connected as you four are really take advantage of that with potentially 3, 5, however many thousand people coming? Where does somebody start? Like, how do they?
I think it starts
Gear up
with
for
stuff
that.
that's already happening.
Yeah.
You know,
Get involved.
Yeah, get
Go
involved.
to
in-
shows.
involved
make
now,
friends.
Yeah, get involved now. You know, be a part of things. There's going to be a ton of things that are happening, and you know, as in the coming weeks, like more announcements and more excitement. But the opportunity or the idea is that things that are already happening are just going to be enhanced.
Mm-hmm.
So get involved with what's currently happening. You know, pay attention, show up at things, and network. Right.
And when you do get the opportunity, give it your all. Just because you don't think it's going to be something that pays out short term, it could be a long term thing. For example, there's the London Arts Council busking program, which I play in a rock band, and when I told our bass player, and they were like, "Ugh, do we want to be part of a busking program?" It was kind of tacky, and it's weird. You go into a boardroom and you play some busking tunes for these people behind a desk, and that doesn't feel very rock and roll at all. And then, but that came with the opportunity to start developing relationships with the Arts Council.
Yeah.
And now we work very closely with them and do other events where we get to be a rock band again. But I
They
mean,
also pay.
exactly it
And pay
pays.
well.
Like
Let's
you
not
can't.
beat around the bush here.
Yeah, that's the main reason I do it. But
Well, and I think, I always say that you have to find London. London doesn't find you. And as a student that was not from here, I really had to dig to find things in London. And for me, it was Call the Office. Like, as soon as I found Call the Office, I was like, oh, God, thank you. I'm at home. My phone. And Call the Office has changed in the last, 12 years. But if you can find a place to start, connecting with other people, because I assume that as students, you're not all from London, Ontario, that, finding a place to hang and that can sometimes be difficult. But it's just rolling back to the Junos, you'll start to see that all of these places are going to be involved. Because we are a smaller market, everything is going to be activated and there's going to be lots of room. One of the things I will say too is that there's going to be, there's a thing called Juno Fest, and you'll be able to apply, bands can apply for Juno Fest similarly to if, Canadian Music Week, North by, any of those festivals. And so then there will be opportunity for bands to play as well through Juno Fest, just as a FYI.
keep that on your radar.
And even with that, with everything that's happening during Junos, if you get a gig and anything that you're a part of, you have no idea who's in the room.
No idea.
And I remember playing a show with a band, this is like 15 years ago, I was in high school kind of thing. And it's kind of always stuck with me because this band just like gave it their all every night. And we did like a little mini tour with them, this band called Mudmen. And they were a really neat band. They had bagpipes in their band and like these two really huge dudes. It was just kind of like a wild look to see on stage. And, talking with the band, they said, what was your biggest break? They said, honestly, we were playing a show for 2 people. We were playing a show for 2 people, and we got so ticked off that no one came to the show. We went 110% where that show played harder than we've ever played. And by the end of it, there's 10 people in the room. And we're like, okay. At the end of it, we didn't get paid. Wasn't a great show. But we brought, 8 more people. And they went and connected with someone in the audience and said, I saw a group of people sort of crowding around, like, what was that about? And he's like, you guys were killer. Like, we got on our phones and started text, or what are the phones? I don't know what it would have been back then, but
T9s.
they connected with, on a pager or whatever, but they connected with people, and next thing you know, they brought people over. One of those people ended up becoming the booking agent, right? From playing for 2 people to 10 people to getting a booking agent. The idea with that is, though, is if you're involved in any of these things leading up to Junos or anything in general, just like give it your all, like Richard said, be invested in it and commit to it. Promote your event as well.
I definitely think it comes back to the networking and collaboration piece. I was going to say also that, so we have, I have my questions that I'm going to ask them. We are also going to open things up, so if any of you do have questions for any of them individually or all of them all together, we'll save some time at the end for your specific questions. And then that said, I'm not sure who has to jet out right at the end of this at 12, but you also have 4 people that have a lot of knowledge of some things that you could be checking out leading up to that. I just want to come back to sort of what you were saying with the Arts Council and taking on a few things that aren't necessarily what you think of when you're thinking of like rock and roll, but you're taking on some other things to forward other opportunities or those other things that have to get done. So this kind of goes off of this a little bit, but how do you balance the creative aspects of being a musician or an artist or working in that field with the other elements that are necessary for success? So maybe the elements that are not quite as fun. Some people really enjoy it, but not everyone does. So the planning, the booking, the accounting. How do you really balance being a creative person in a creative field with sort of the other things that need to get done?
That's a really hard thing to do. I'll be honest, sometimes one suffers. So depending on what month you're in or what season, if it's in grant writing season, your art's going to suffer. But then once that's done, you take all that stress and you can put it into your art. So it kind of goes in waves for me at least. I know every morning I'm up writing emails for a couple hours or booking or doing that stuff, but then I also like to keep my artist part going by booking practices with bands every night, so I know I have that creative outlet. And you have to kind of force it, because at the end of the day you don't really want to go and practice for a couple hours. But it's always going to be a give and take. One's going to suffer where the other's doing great. And you kind of have to just look at your successes with that, because it's hard to do everything all the time. And especially being in a band, you'll realize that half your bandmates can't do a lot of anything. So
we'll get to that question. It's coming up.
So you got to know what hats to wear and where your strengths are, and then also very much so where to delegate, because your band members will have their strengths. And when you're working with other artists, when you're writing grants and stuff too, you have to know when to step back and know what you can do and what you can't do.
I've certainly never worked on a project by myself. It's always been with other folks and other people, and it's really important. Even on the production side or behind the scenes side, there's still a creative piece to it, but then there's still a whole bunch of administration to it. And it does take a while to figure out what your strengths are. For me anyways, it took me a while, and now I just know what I'm not good at. And
that's the best thing to know. It's going to save you so much time.
It took me a long time.
And once you know where to delegate and this is just not what I do best, I'm not going to do it.
Can do it.
Yeah.
And then banging your head on the wall trying to get something together, it's never going to be as good as someone that's their job or that's what they do.
My thought is, if somebody's really good at doing it, why not? If you can. Now, I'll also say that there were many years where, and still sometimes where you can't, you don't have the luxury. You don't have the luxury of paying someone to do these things. That's why it's nice when you're on the ground floor to make these connections. It comes back to people in your community, friendships, all of these things that you can do. Trading is amazing. I've done so many trades. I'll trade you for anything. Yeah. What do you want? Concert tickets? I'll trade you for. Anyways, and through that process, though, you find the good people that want to be a part of your projects or your band or whatever the case may be, and those are the things that last forever. Even if in 10 years from now you're not, playing in a band, you probably will still have these relationships with people who've been along that path with you, which is pretty remarkable. I've had friends that have worked on projects and now live on the other side of the world, and we still touch base. It's really important.
I think I really like what Richard was saying in terms of, so there's that, those waves sort of, and you were saying, you know, grant writing season, and then maybe you go on tour or something like that, but even the, like, daily, right? So even within the course of one day, there's that wave of, like, this time in the morning I've cut out for doing some of the more boring email accounting stuff, but then I have practice. What does that look like for you, Carly, in terms of kind of?
Yeah, I was just going to say I try to give myself a routine. I'm sometimes not a very organized person, so that's one of the things that I'm trying to get stronger at, but I've given myself sort of a routine, and just doing the work is so important. I have a couple days a week that I'm more focused on the business stuff, and I'm writing emails, and I'm trying to, like, making phone calls and bookings and stuff like that. And then I have some days where I will sit and just create from like 9 to 1 or whatever time frame I give myself, and even if nothing comes of it, I'm like sitting there and doing the work, because sometimes that's kind of the hardest part, when I want to be doing creative things, but I'm not feeling inspired. So you have to sort of sit down and almost not wait for it, but just do something. Just get working on it.
It comes back to what Cory was saying about showing up. So maybe
For
you just
sure.
you show up to that
Yeah.
time, and if something magical happens,
Yeah.
awesome, but it's not going to happen every
Yeah.
single time. So
I try to use my calendar a lot now.
Lost without that.
Yeah,
Completely
I
lost.
can't. You gotta have everything in the calendar.
And I think that it even as you get busier as an artist, you know, I've worked with lots of artists, and my other half is a very busy touring musician. Like, it doesn't end. Like, even, you know, he has management and agents now, and he still gets up every single day and he's on the computer immediately, because now, even though there's management, there's like a new level, right?
No, yeah.
Now there's management,
Yeah.
and now he's having to delegate with the rest of the band, still organizing people's schedules, still figuring out, okay, can we tour, can we practice, when do we have to do this? I mean, it's still a full-time gig forever.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to
I think
recognize too.
that's an interesting point to bring up too, is that I know, like, so step out of my role now, and there's a lot of administrative stuff, but there are still spots that I find, like, artistic, right? But to that point that, you know, you get involved and you work and you work and you work. And I was getting to a point where I was like, you know, 10 years ago, I'm like, I can't imagine being any busier. Like, starting a business, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm like, I can't imagine taking on any more work. And I remember, like, take it back to, like, our screen printing business. We got started working with bands, and we're servicing bands. And, you know, we said, wow, if we had one client a day, every day, we'd be killing it, right? And all of a sudden you go from that's 1 year, and then the next year you're doing 3 clients a day. Then all of a sudden you have 10 orders due every single day. You're ripping your hair out, and you look back and you're like, last year I couldn't imagine getting busier. The year before that I couldn't imagine getting busier.
Yeah.
You somehow, it just seems like you just take on more and more and more, and you get comfortable with it. And I think that's what's important about, we talked about, like, back in this community here, is getting your footing. You know, having a bit of a safety net when you're first, not saying that you shouldn't go out there and try for things you can't attain. Absolutely do that, but having that footing and having a bit of a safety net in a community like this that's supportive is a really important piece. I couldn't have done what we did, like my brother and I with our businesses. I couldn't have done that in another community where I didn't have support, right?
Exactly.
So if you find a supportive network, which you have here, I think it's a really key piece, but that's not even the question you asked.
But yeah,
at all.
use your support systems.
No, but it's
Any ones you have. That's
Yeah.
a big thing, because you're never gonna make it alone, no matter what you think.
And it makes those, my roundabout point is that it makes those, like, administrative pieces a lot easier to do. And then when you can actually celebrate and focus and work on, like, your artistic piece, it makes it that much sweeter, kind of thing.
So maybe a bit of a boring question, but do you have one tip for artist entrepreneurs to help them stay organized? I'm a big organization nerd, so I like this question, but for those who maybe struggle with it a little bit more.
Write your to-do list. Every time you think of something that needs done, just write it down, and that helps me a lot. Just, book. If someone even says, are you available for a gig, just write it down instantly. Because you don't know how many times, if you'll forget any of those small details, just like, I have to mail out vinyl, write that down, and then eventually you go to your to-do list when you're a little more settled down. But in, like, you're rushing around doing things, just do a quick, I do it on my phone, really quick, just a note, I have to do this. And then I forget about it till I look at my to-do list.
I was going to ask, are you a pen and paper to-do list, or do you have a?
No, I have terrible handwriting.
Yeah.
Can't read it.
Okay, so phone app. Carly, you mentioned the calendar. Is that where everything goes?
Yeah, definitely calendar. And the stuff that you really don't want to do it right away.
yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do
Yeah,
now.
that's
And
tough.
it makes a difference, because it's like, okay, just done.
Do you
It's like
actually?
eating your Brussels sprouts first?
So,
Oh, Brussels sprouts.
You know
You
what I
gotta
mean?
come
When
over.
you
I'll
were a
make you some
kid.
Brussels sprouts.
Do you actually, in your calendar, schedule the creative time that you were mentioning as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I usually do, like, I'll sit down and I'll plan the next week, or sometimes it's 2 weeks, but usually it's sort of, I'll sit down on a Sunday and this is my week, this is what I'm doing.
And I think that's a really interesting thing, because I know I'm sort of in the creative world, I'm not a musician, but that idea of sort of scheduling creative time just kind of goes against what a lot of people think. They're like, no, it's this magical moment, it just happens, and you know.
I used to think I was like, oh, I get inspired really late at night. Like, I've done a lot of writing late at night, which I still do, but I was always kind of, I took that train of thought and I was just like, yeah, that's just how I work. But then once I started forcing myself to sit down at like 9 a.m. and do work for 4 or 5 hours on a new song or whatever it is, I found that so much happened. It's just starting, really. It's just not waiting for the inspiration, I guess.
I think that's a key piece,
creating.
right?
Yeah.
I think what you're saying sort of there is basically chunking your time up and sectioning it off. And that's something that I've had a lot of trouble with. My wife will be the first one to tell you that. And having a daughter like 3 years ago really forced me to do that, saying, I'm not available 24/7 anymore. I can't take your call at 3 o'clock in the morning because you're stuck at the border. I can't deal with that, sorry.
Yeah.
And so that has actually helped me a lot, like really sort of prioritizing my time. You know, I have one day, like Sunday night, like don't call me, don't do anything unless it's 911. That has actually really helped me focus a lot. So understanding that, you know, different people have these different pockets and these different windows when you can work with them. That is a big piece to, I think, to success, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing when you can connect with somebody, and now I see that in other people, right? Like, to me, time is my most valuable thing. So when someone comes at me at the wrong time, it's just like, I'm not in the headspace for that. It's, you know, and cold calls, a lot of people will just pop in, and yes, they're good, but it can be really difficult. Someone comes in and it's like, I genuinely would like to talk to you, but like, you have no idea what's going on in my head right now, and
Yeah.
I'm not here. So I like to schedule chunk times off for this kind of thing happens, this kind of thing happens, and then establishing that relationship between work and your personal life kind of thing. Especially as bands, like, you need to be 24/7, but there's a limit to that. It's not 24/7, you can't do. No one can do that, right? So understanding what you can do, how much you can handle, and then working towards that, right?
And I think that you can also live a creative life and still get things done. It just depends how you approach life and your space and your friends and who you surround yourself with and the things that you decide to do. I'm trying not to be too wishy-washy, but you know, I think it's possible. It's very difficult, because it is very difficult to turn it off, especially someone who's, you know, with a musician. It's just that his brain doesn't turn off, and you know, sometimes he gets frustrated that he can't spend a lot of more time writing music, you know, and they're still playing the same songs they were, you know, whatever, that they wrote 2 years ago, but because that's where the industry has now caught up with it. It's like, okay, well, we're really interested in this record. He's like, okay, well, I'm done with this material. But anyways, it's just the way that it goes. So you can get caught up is the point. But I think that there is a way. I mean, it's also good to remember who inspires you, remember who you look up to, remember who those artists are that you admire. You know, it doesn't have to be someone from the Rolling Stones. Like, there are really great artists in this community. I mean, you know, Ron Sexsmith just moved to Stratford because he decided that after living in Toronto for 25 years, never going to be able to afford real estate. He wanted to be able to afford a place for his family. And I think that that's really interesting to think about. It's like, oh, somebody awesome who's been working in the arts, not making bazillions of dollars by any means, just being a great Canadian musician with national recognition, international recognition, is living down the road in a simple way. And that is amazing. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, I think you can find it in other ways.
Yeah, well, and I think you've all sort of touched on, in different ways, and actually in answering some of the other questions too, sort of being able to know yourself and figure out what that balance looks like, right? The 24/7 is not possible. Figuring out, right, whether it's, you know, time late at night is when it's better for me to be creative. I maybe get more done if I get up right away and tackle these things first. So getting to know yourself, and then even what Cory was saying is getting to know the people that you're working with too, right? So realizing what's the best way that they prefer you to reach out to them or when, and sort of really being able to coordinate that so that it moves forward.
And I think to that point
smoothly.
too is really understanding what you're asking of people, understanding what their time commitment's going to be. You know, when I was first playing in a band and trying to get an agent and a manager and those pieces, I didn't really understand how many other artists they were working with. And so say they're working with 10 artists, you know, how much time they're able to devote. And I'm like, you're interested, why can't you sign us right now? And it's just, they just don't have time because they're in that stage where they're developing an artist, which takes a lot more time, right? So I think when you're looking at building a team as an artist and working with other people, really understand, I think one of the most important things is just like understanding what you're asking of other people, being concise in what you're asking them. You know, really not being rude, but you need to be to the point. You don't want to beat around the bush. You know, we kind of really want to kind of go on tour in
Maybe.
somewhere maybe next summer or winter or fall. Like, that helps nobody, right?
Do it, let me know
We'd
when
like to
to
go on
book
tour
July.
in this part of the country at this time of the year after we put out a record.
Yeah, establishing
Okay.
your goals. Like,
Right,
no.
so knowing what you want, establishing those goals and working towards them, and then understanding how people fit in them.
And I think it also goes along with, so we're talking about organization, we're talking about the networking and collaboration piece and all of that, but I want to come back to what Richard was saying around knowing when to say no to certain things too, right? And being able to know, you know, I'm really good at taking on this role, but I'm really not good at this, or this is not the job that I want to take on. So this kind of goes along with that, but how do you determine when is a good time? I don't even know, I don't even know if when is the right word here, but how do you determine when or how to bring on other people? So to figure out who are the other people that can help you and what roles they're going to take on.
0%, or 10% of 0 is 0. So
Say
if
that
you-
again, I'm not good at math. Okay, go.
So 10% of 0 is 0. 20% of 0 is 0. If you're not making any money, no one's interested typically in working with you. So you need to be able to prove to somebody that their time is worth something.
Does your band make money?
And it's not always financial, right? You know, an artist may be able to open a door for somebody. So they may look at it, their investment and the return is going to be a door being opened or a connection to somebody. So you need to be able to make that case. An agent isn't going to book you a tour if they're making $50 a date, because they're not making, or if the band's making $50 a date, typically. So you really need to sort of paint that picture as to why someone should be working with you. So it goes back to understanding other people's goals, their time, what they're able to do. So it's a good conversation to have with people, right?
I think nowadays you have to really learn how to do it all yourself first, and then the moment where you feel like you don't need that other person is kind of when
That's when they jump in and say,
Yeah.
hey, thanks.
it's kind of the rule sometimes. When you understand exactly what you do need, and that's kind of when you can seek it out. And yeah,
I guess, I mean, it kind of goes along with that too, sort of like that mix between a DIY mentality, like I have to take on everything myself and literally do everything, versus maybe more of a professionalism, I can have some other people helping us out. So like how do you two, well, but how do you navigate how much you take on, when you start to delegate different things, like what does that look like?
I base it on when I need a certain thing. Like I will, like when I did a tour, I will get an agent involved in that tour. So I do it sort of more project-based, I guess. And that just works for me. I don't know if that's what you do.
I still do a lot of everything. I don't like doing social media, so I delegate that very much so. So I know I'm not always going to be snapping pictures, getting the best quality, so we use a social media calendar, and we have a couple of the guys, they just schedule a post, and we keep that updated and base the post around events and special shows and stuff like that. So I know very much where I don't want to be doing that. But it also, the biggest thing in the Canadian music scene is longevity. So if you're an artist, don't expect to break in the first 2, 3, 4 years. Many of the acts that we know and love of Canadian artists have been around for 5 to 7 before they were even in our scopes. And that's a big thing. So after those 2 to 3 years, you've got a pretty good hold on what you should know in the scene and what you're good at and what you're not good at. But it's those 2 to 3 years developing, just being in the scene, playing that shitty
like
tour.
the 10-year overnight success.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to be the...
Well,
the-
and
yeah.
then I think it's an important thing to mention too, that trajectory, it's the same way up as it is the same way down. You see someone's career take off like this, their career goes down like that too.
Because they don't have the skills
They don't have that
necessary
base
to keep
built, and they don't have that understanding. So you want a natural progression like that, but you need to understand also too that there are pitfalls, there are valleys to it, right? Your career goes like this. So long as it's going up, that's good. Or you find a nice spot where you can sort of plateau a bit. that's good, but there's ups and downs in it. And I think that's one piece that a lot of people struggle with after they've had some success. Is all of a sudden, you know, their record's a little old and they're not, you know, they're not out there and as relevant as they were 6 months ago. There's a lot of hype around a new release. There's a lot of hype around that stuff, and it's important not to get, you know, dismissive of about your career or upset that, you know, you're not riding that same wave, right?
Perfect example, Lights. Like Terry McManus used to work with her, and I saw her 14 years ago at the Salt Lounge. If anyone remembers that venue, which is non-existent here, but there was maybe 24 people at that show, and then this weekend she played Music Hall, huge crowd. But that's a 14-year career.
4 records later.
Yeah, she played the Junos this year too, and so.
I think it's important too to define what your definition, like define success for you.
Yeah.
Because I think it's different for everyone. It depends like where you want to go and like what that means to you. Whether it's just being able to make a living, like you know, have, or whether you want more or less. Like it's different for everyone. I think I'm still sort of defining that as I go too.
And as an organizer and sort of community person, I mean, I have worked for free for so long, to the point where I just physically can't do it anymore. Emotionally, I also can't do it, I don't think. You know, because you just reach this point of like total exhaustion, but then also realizing that unless you start putting a value on yourself, and I do not mean this in like a capitalistic sense at all, but once you figure out what you're worth and you're like, okay, I've done it. I've worked for everybody. I've volunteered for this person. I've done this for that person. I've thrown a show for bands and taken money out of my own pocket so that I make sure that touring band is leaving with at least $100, because I think it's important that if you're a touring band,
you make some money.
You make some money. And I've convinced all the locals to take no money so that you're going to get paid. We've all been through that process. You just reach this point of like, okay, I've done that. I've experienced it. I think it's important to go through that process. And now I know what I'm worth, and now I can figure out what my goals are and coming back to it, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I do want to do, what I don't want to do.
It's like interning.
Yeah.
But
Seriously,
I think that was a good question that you were sort of talking about, like learning to say no. And I think even me, as recent as like 3 years ago, in my last role, I just felt like I could never say no. I was always chasing money to pay something off, to do this. And now I can step back and look 3 years later and go, what the hell was I doing? Like I was saying yes to every single thing, because it was like, it would lead to this, it would lead to that, but then all of a sudden you have zero time. You're so spread so thin that you can't concentrate on what you need to. So I think saying no is okay. But it's, you know, early on you say yes to a lot of things. So.
Well, it comes back to showing up.
Yeah.
That's when you say yes to everything. When you're showing up, you take it, yes, no matter what. But then you reach a threshold.
I heard
So put value on yourself, right?
But that goes for both sides, bands and representation and management. Like everyone, you start, like I played shows for free, I did booking for free and stuff, but at a certain point you reach that limit where, okay, I know what I'm doing now, you can pay me not to mess it up. That's essentially it. Yeah.
But it goes back to knowing sort of what you're saying yes to, right? Like, are you going to say yes to an extra shift at the grocery store? You know, why are you saying yes to it, kind of thing. So understanding that you are worth something, and you're doing this, you're saying yes for free, and you're helping for free potentially for something bigger, right? For some a grander vision kind of thing.
Well, and it's nice too. What Carly was saying, it is a good time to be in this community in London because, for example, there are programs that were never here before, like the program Richard was talking about. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an email from like a very high-level organization saying, can you help me book a band, but I don't want to pay the band. We'll give them, you know, social media or media exposure. It's like, well, no, I can't. I physically can't ask my dentist to work for free, so I can't ask this band to do any more pro bono work. So if you're not going to do it, then we're just going to walk away. Whereas now there's a program that's helping those organizations understand that, we have to pay bands, and bands are getting paid locally in a way that they were never getting paid before. So it is kind of an interesting time. You just have to find it.
And that's, I think, the most important piece. It's not even that the bands are getting paid.
Well,
it's that they're changing the culture on it, right? They're changing the culture that, no, a band is worth money. You wouldn't
because
ask.
now you can get so much music for free out there, and the industry's changed in that way so much that I think it's a responsibility for hardest to put value on themselves and to make that's important.
So I'm going to throw a wrench in things a little bit. Say you have developed an understanding of yourself. You know yourself really well. You know where the balance is. You know where you want to say no. What happens when you have some other people in the mix? So if you're in a band, how do you navigate some different, maybe you've even defined what success looks like to you, but what if success looks like something different to bandmates, to other festival organizers? What happens then?
For me, the band, we're diplomatic. We vote. Unfortunately, there's 4 of us, so.
A lot of stalemates.
Yeah. Well, we've spent so much time together that we kind of all have a hive mind, so it doesn't become an issue because at one point we had 8 band members, and that's the thing. Longevity, you don't find 8 people who want to hang out together for 5 years.
Unless you're
Every
playing
day in a van. So once that breaks it down, then it becomes a little easier.
Even things in terms of like different like commitment levels. So even maybe now you guys are sort of more. You said sort of the hive mind. So you maybe think a little bit more like that when you're.
This because some band members cannot commit as much time and just finance, just because based on their situation, the reality is some people have to have that 9 to 5. And it's a lot of supplementing your income when you're a musician. You're not just going to be a musician. I don't know people who are just musicians.
Not anymore.
No. Even the best musicians are not just musicians. They're all wearing producer's hats, engineering hats, session hats. They're doing different stuff. There's no just existing as a musician because gigs just don't pay that much.
I thought for a long time I wanted to be a band manager, and then I started managing bands, and I was like, no, because you're managing personalities. And
Yeah,
it's very
you're not just
difficult.
booking them. You got to get them at the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's harder than a thing.
Especially in those early development stages where you're trying to help out your friends, let's say, and manage your friends' bands. It's really eye-opening, and you really see quickly where things are breaking down, and also where things are positive, but it was just not.
For me, the
was not
breakthrough
for
point came when I found out everyone can invest 25%. And you just knowing and just separating that part of your brain, being like, okay, they're doing what they can. As long as they keep doing that, I've accepted they're going to be doing this. It's delegating, and it's knowing they're committing when they can. They have to have that 9 to 5. They can't be there all the time. So you just have to, certain gigs, as long as the weekends are open for gigs, stuff like that, then you all understand. But if you're being like, well, I'm busting my ass, why aren't all my band members busting my ass? You're never going to have a band.
It's not a school project,
No.
so-and-so didn't pull their weight.
Well, it kind of is, because there's always that.
Well, I guess. I guess that is what it is.
That's what school projects taught you more than you thought.
Yeah.
And Carly, so you're like a little different in the sense that Richard's with a full band.
Yeah.
Your name is out there at the forefront. So how does that?
I hire my band when I play with the band. So
That's the best case scenario.
Because of that reason that I know what I want. I know what I want to be doing, and I've found players that are serious about what they do, and they have that commitment level. And if they don't, then I find I don't work with them. So a lot of time, if there's not budget for a band, I do a lot of solo shows or duo shows. But if there's a big opportunity that I really want to, because I do I prefer playing with a band. I have been working with people that they kind of get it too in that sense. So we have a good relationship, whereas they will be like, yeah, of course we'll play this show, and I'm always really fair, and so they're willing to sort of, be a part of the team as well. But yeah, I hire my guys because I've tried to form a band, but it was too complicated, and I was kind of at that stage where I was like, I'm serious about what I'm doing, and I just don't have time to work through all that. So I've just found, it took a while, but I found some really great players that I can count on. And
So again, kind of figuring out, right? So maybe.
Yeah, there's different models for sure. I play in Wolf Saga, and for that, I'm most part times a hired session musician for it. But I do help with as the relationship gone on, moved more in it. But we also have a drummer we hire, so he works as a solo artist. But when he needs a bigger band, and when you have those bigger shows, you get a bigger budget, obviously. So artist relationships, that's a big thing.
yeah.
And knowing which key players you can call, because you don't want to hire someone and then they botch it.
That's also really fun, it's networking too, right? Because a lot of the guys that I play with have other bands, and so sometimes it's switching up it's interesting the different style and different personalities that people bring in, and I kind of have fun with that too. So
That's kind of an interesting, it kind of leads in. I've got just a couple more questions, and then I'm going to open it up if anybody,
Is
again.
this helpful for everyone? I don't know who's all here.
Can we, yeah, do we have heads nodding that this is helpful?
Cool.
I guess we should have asked that before we were an hour and a half in, but that's all right.
By the way, are you in?
I think I want to go, again, like a lot of the same themes are continuing to come up as the four of you are talking, and I think that's the really key things to take away from some of this. But again, just kind of going off, another question that sort of goes off of what you guys were saying before. You're not only just wearing one hat, and there's a lot of other opportunities out there. And I like the way Cory was saying, it is opportunities, right? There's the stuff that you feel like you have to do in terms of I have to wear these hats, but there is a lot of other things that you can be doing. Maybe doesn't feel as rock and roll, but does contribute to different opportunities. So if you are in this industry or in a band, what other opportunities are actually out there in addition to just being on a stage?
I think there's a lot, and this was sort of the focus of, we did a career day back in November. We'll be doing it, it'll be an annual thing, and the focus of it is all those support mechanisms that help the industry, help artists. For every musician on stage, every one musician on stage, there's 10 people behind the scenes that are making things happen. And again, it's to understanding what your strength is. If you're a strong writer, have you thought about being a publicist and working in the music industry, right? You got to meet some pretty cool people and be involved in some pretty neat things, but you work on your skill set, right? You work as a writer. Do you have an eye for photography? There's all these different avenues. Are you an accountant? Do you have there's so many different ways that you can train in formal education, please your parents, and then step into the music industry. And so I think it's really understanding what your strengths are, knowing your strengths, and sometimes it takes some time to find that. And, falling on your face flat a number of times, but there are a ton of opportunities. I recently was talking with, I'm going to blank on their names now, the guys that wrote the Indie Bible Guide. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book series. They're coming out with a new one. We're looking at bringing them to town in the next year or so. And they came up with, as an artist, as a musician, someone who plays an instrument, over 250 revenue streams. Like, it's crazy.
Yes.
250 revenue streams because you can play music. And wearing multiple hats. I talked with a lot of people. A couple years ago, I was out with the Vans Warped Tour doing some, connecting with a couple different people there. And one of the things that really struck me is that all these musicians, they all know how to play. They can talk music. So they've started this thing called, I think, the Education Institute, TEI. I think it's called. And the focus of it was, okay, so I'm on stage playing in front of 10,000 people. Do you want to come now have a personal drum lesson with me for half an hour? It's $50 kind of thing. So they fill their day up with this kind of stuff, right? And then you got talking with them a little bit. They Skype in, and they'll Skype in people from around the world, and they'll pay $50 an hour to have this drummer do. I was watching the drummer for August Burns Red, who's an absolutely incredible drummer.
He's insane.
He just one of the best drummers I've seen, and there's 4 kids that are sitting there paying $50 an hour to watch their favorite musician teach them drums. And I don't think any of them are saying anything. Their jaw was dropped, right, the whole time. And it was, so the idea is that there's all these different avenues as a musician that you can.
And doesn't that speak to the spirit of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, musicians have to be entrepreneurs.
But it's
I was
true.
going to make the connection, but you go ahead.
It's true. It's true because you have to do all the things, and those guys don't need the $50 an hour.
No.
But it's just part of what it is.
I was talking with him, and all that money that he made on tour, he bought an engagement ring for his fiance, right?
It's amazing.
I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Where else could you do that?
Yeah.
But Nick from the Arkells, he used to do their accounting till last year, all of it.
Yeah.
And he's a bass player and an accountant now. He's like, that's just one of the hats he had to wear. And that their level, it's serious accounting. There's a lot of ins and outs, like tour bus rental. They did it all internally. And so, tour bus, all their tour techs, the lighting, and so I really respect him for that.
That's cool.
And then you see, because every band probably has a story like that. Well, if you find something you're good at, every musician can be their own entrepreneur. If you're doing all your social media, you have a social media profile. You helped your Instagram likes climb 10K in a couple months. That's all your hard work of posting. You know the algorithm, you know the posting schedules. Start your social media company, help other bands or help other people do it. Like, honestly, that's
and
what
we
it is.
talked about it earlier. I said you're talking about that you rehearse in your in Will's parents'
Oh yeah,
garage. And I
having
said,
someone who knows vehicles is key.
is
Oh,
huge,
yeah.
right? And I know I've known people that
Yes.
that are in bands too that have been able to do that, right? Like we were touring with a group one time and we had transmission issues. Guy throws the hood up and I was like, wow, you just saved us like $700 in
Yeah.
a matter of 30
it's-
minutes, right? Like,
Yeah, we do all our own oil changes, stuff like little
Yeah.
things. Do your van maintenance before tour. That's why my van's at 589,000 kilometers.
That's crazy.
You got to quit saying that, though. 'Cause I'm
It's going to hit
feeling nervous
99.
right now.
know.
It's not going anywhere.
5 what?
589.
Oh, nice.
I mean, yeah, we used to
That's
own an old
ridiculous.
school bus and we never
Oh, yeah,
got
that
to that, but it was a diesel. And
Speaking of different hats that you have to wear, I like that. But coming back to the entrepreneurship point too, I think that sometimes, we see it with entrepreneurs through Leap Junction, but even with the creative side, you sort of have this one path or this one direction that you envision, I have to pour my heart and soul into all of this and not necessarily deviate from that plan. But I liked what Savanah said in terms of, you tried being a brand manager, realized that you didn't really want to do it, and then that helps you sort of hone in on what you're wanting to do. So just that idea of like, it's not the worst thing in the world if you are sort of deviating from what you've imagined that path is going to look like, but all of those other things that you're doing actually do contribute to you building, different skills or figuring out what you want to do, what you don't want to do. So it's
And doing those other things can make what you're really passionate about possible too.
yeah,
So.
exactly.
And why not do it in the same sort of arena?
Well, the more you understand that happens behind the scenes makes you a better musician. The more that you understand the person that wrapped your cable, the person that is at behind, front of house, all of those things help you be more polite and kind, because we've all heard the stories of, the pompous artists who,
Ticks
treat
off
people
your
like
sound
crap.
guy.
And, there's especially when you're touring at a very high level, there are so many people that go into pulling that off. And, I love working big, large shows because the excitement is amazing, right? Like, it's just this energy that you can't contain. But there are so many people behind the scenes. Like, when I was working Way Home, which is no longer, unfortunately, but the staff tent for lunch on those 3 days of festival are nuts. Like, there's way more people in that tent than there are in the artist tent, right? There's like everybody from the person that installed the lights to the person that, dug different holes. Like, it's nuts how many people go into pulling these things off. So there are way more jobs than I think we give it credit for, and we recognize. And, it's there. Even just like somebody does quick change, like a wardrobe change underneath a stage for Bruno Mars or whatever. But that's a job. That's someone's full-time job, and they work so hard. They work 16 hours a day, specifically for that. I had no idea that was even a thing, So.
And it's incredible some of these jobs, what they can do. Like I have a friend right now that's at Coachella and doing merchandising for Coachella and Stagecoach, is it? The country festival.
Stagecoach.
And he's down there for 5 weeks, paid 5 weeks, working 60-hour weeks. This guy's seen 52 countries with a massive band, and he started out like he does merchandising. Yeah. And he started out in the back of a van, traveling across the U.S., not getting paid, and it's led him to 52 countries he saw in 1 year on one record cycle. He's got a gold record hanging in his house because this record, the band says, would not be possible if it wasn't for him. And that, is such a huge statement. A guy that it gives me chills because I'm so stoked for him. He put so much energy into this. This band has a gold record, and they equate the gold record back to how much merchandise this guy was able to help push out.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
One of the other things I'll say quickly too is that Cirque du Soleil is an amazing company. It's also Canadian, which is kind of cool. Cirque has a really interesting program. So obviously, if you're an acrobat, it's a pretty taxing. It's pretty taxing on your body physically. But what they've started to do is train some of those guys that were acrobats to be riggers. And so, because think about it, somebody especially from these international countries, they come, they do their thing, but their body can only take it for 2 or 3 years, and then they're training these folks who understand how it all works, how to climb up and hang the stage and the trussing and stuff. So it's kind of interesting because those jobs, they want to keep people in house and they want to keep training people. And if you're looking to ever get on the road, honestly, look into Cirque because they are an incredible training process. And if you go on their website, there's like a whole section for artists, but there's also a huge section for technical support, like carpentry, but also like the band. I mean, there's so many pieces to Cirque, and they train people really phenomenally, and they send you around the world, and their big top tours do like 6 weeks at a time. And it's
Join the circus.
I think.
It's amazing. I've worked for Cirque many times. It's
What
amazing
a
company.
strange end to the Leap Talks. Join the circus. That's go from fan shot, join the circus. I have two more, but I mean, I guess again, it's in the spirit of entrepreneurship as well, sort of like coming up with those creative ways. If you think I'm in this program and I'm going to be the lead singer in a band and that's all I'm going to do, then really sort of being creative and figuring out, different ways that your band or yourself can do some different things. But I'm going to just end off my part of it with two questions. I'm gonna challenge you all, or whoever answers it, to be fairly concise on these last two, and then I'll turn the mic over to anybody who has questions. So just because you have talked about a lot of things that have worked for you and a lot of the positives of staying here in the city, of networking, I want to hear something you failed at. So what is one thing, one setback? No, you can only answer one, Cory. So what is one setback or failure you had in your current job, in launching a band, whatever it was, but also how did it improve, or what did it help you learn in the present day?
Anyone jump in at
Not
this point?
writing, not having a contract.
Sorry.
Not writing something down, not getting it in writing in an email, whatever
Yeah.
kind of contract it is.
Never go in the
And
studio
lost
without
money.
paperwork.
So that's really important when you're doing stuff. Like for me, it was a couple gigs, and it was the worst because I didn't get paid, and I had budgeted a certain way. So getting everything in writing, super important.
Yeah, if you go into the studio and they're like, yeah, we'll just start working now, we'll get the contract later, don't put anything down. That's what happened to me twice, and then things just fall into limbo. It's pretty annoying. So yeah, if you're ever in the studio and they're like, and they say they're gonna have their contract there that day and they don't have it that day, you don't have to record. That's very annoying. Lost a lot of bed
I
troubles.
got a couple. Trying to make one that's relevant and appropriate. I think one that I definitely had challenges with was working with a buddy instead of a proper accountant.
Yeah.
And we got burnt on like probably like a $100,000 grant because of it. Just not paying attention to the detail. And working with someone that didn't really understand what they're doing, and none of it made sense. And getting a phone call from that granting organization saying you're half a point off, you got like basically zero on your financial statement,
Shit.
and your grant was strong enough that you're half a point off from getting funding, and you got that poor on your financial statement. Like, fix it, and that's it, and it's done. And it's like that was like 3 months worth of work. And I was just like brick wall, like wow, all the momentum in the world gone. And it's not even like it's a business thing. It's the music business. If you don't get business, find someone that gets the business aspect of it, right? If you're the creative, you got the creative juices and you can do that, find someone that knows the business side of it.
That's good advice. Savannah, one setback or
Oh, so
failure
many.
and what you've learned?
Oh, so many. I mean, similar situation, I would say, about finances, just working with friends and not understanding in those early days about how to manage that appropriately. Everyone has access to a bank account. Money goes away. You have no idea where it went. Oh. And actually,
Yeah.
in a really crappy kind of way, find out that your friend is actually having a very hard time. The whole full circle. So yeah, I mean, dealing with friends can sometimes have its difficulties, but learning.
I think it comes back to the
I
relationship
got a
stuff.
big one though, especially in this industry,
Yep.
knowing when to party and when not to party.
Oh,
Seriously.
Would you like to elaborate on that? I'm interested.
Just like the first 5 years of my career, you wish you would have learned that a little quicker, but it happens. And watching relationships and stuff like that, always be courteous. You never know who you're going to be hanging out with and when you're going to regret something, So just, yeah.
I feel like there's much more to that story that I would like to hear
But you know what I'm saying.
off
Go to
camera.
time.
All right.
All the networking dudes at bars too, so it's kind of hard.
That, no, that's,
Knowing when the microphone's on.
Yeah.
knowing when the microphone's on. Okay, I like this. Now, see, now some of the dirt's coming out.
Yeah.
I like this a little bit. Okay, I'm going to end off with one, and maybe it does tie in just to what you were saying with some of those as well. If you could give one piece of advice to these fine folks who are exploring this career, this world, what would you say to them?
For me, I would say just start off trying to be organized, because I was really disorganized for a long time, and it's actually still something I'm working on. Right when you start, right when you make the decision to take it seriously, just be organized about everything.
There's ups and downs. There's a lot of ups. The highs, I think, are higher than you can ever expect. I think the lows are actually really lower than you can ever really expect. Just shoot towards that stability, right? Try and find stability. Try and find what makes you happy with it. And just remember that good days are ahead. Stick it out. I think stick it out.
Yeah.
Show up and stick it out.
Show
I
up
like
and
that.
stick out. Yeah.
Yeah, remember what inspires you. Remember why you're here. Remember why you're sitting in this chair. Remember those things. Because it is easy to get caught up, but if you can remember why you're here in the first place, regardless of the situation, it's going to help you in the long run. Honestly, for me, it's Bill Graham. You read about him. He's amazing.
Mine comes from Leap. Make nerdy spreadsheets. Seriously, write down every show you make, how much money you make, everything you've done. Keep track of it, because for grants and just down the line, you want to be like, who was that promoter I booked that with, or what was that venue, or when we went on tour, or just how much merch sales you're doing, everything. Keep numbers on that, and then if you're not having fun, don't do it.
Fantastic words of advice. I think the other thing is, even the nerdy spreadsheets, they don't sound very fun, but I also use my nerdy spreadsheets to look back and go, wow, I've really accomplished a lot in the last year.
That's a huge thing, too.
So it sounds like a nerdy spreadsheet, but it's also like, oh, that's really cool
life
that I
tracker.
actually did that. Yeah, it's a life tracker.
Someone's going to ask you for that information anyway, so you might as well have it.
All right, I am going to bring the mic in if you have questions for them individually or as a group. Can I just get a big round of applause to them for the questions they did answer? And I'm assuming, will this give bad feedback if I travel around, or we should be good? Okay, so let me get some Fitbit steps in here. If you have any questions for anyone, just throw a hand up. Yeah, don't be scared of them. They're very nice people. Yeah, person furthest from me to start off. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Ooh, there's stairs here too.
This is like Donahue. Did anyone know?
Yeah, oh my
Do you remember?
gosh.
Okay.
So my question is more for the promotion and like organization side. So as a band or group or artist, what's something that you can do to kind of go the extra mile or really impress like promoters or organizers of festivals and like build those good relationships so they want to have you back and they are like, oh, I don't want this person here again, like so they keep inviting you back?
Just be a nice person, and if you have assholes in your band, keep them away.
Don't let them talk.
Don't let them talk to the people that make decisions,
So like
honestly.
let the people who know how to talk do the talking.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we just want, everyone just wants to know you're a real person. We're all real people here, so let's just be real and honest. You know, put your best foot forward. But also, sometimes can be too much, right? Like you don't have to like buy me a drink or anything, but just be respectful and yeah.
Big
Saying
things in the
thank you.
follow-up.
Yeah.
Send the thank you follow-up
Yeah.
and follow up with every email essentially too. And just be good dudes or girls or people.
I like when people are concise to the point with it.
Yeah.
And it helps. I like that because it's just, I think someone knows what they want at that point. I like to help people when they know what they want. If someone comes to me and they're totally lost, I don't mind help giving guidance, but it makes someone's job a lot easier if you come in and say, this is sort of what we're looking to do. I always liked it when I was booking bands and I'd have, say a band from Florida saying, hey, this is going to be an anchor date playing this festival and we can launch this and that off of it. And it was like, okay, these guys have a plan. This group has a plan. I love supporting people like that and being a piece of that plan. It makes you feel really good. I remember working with a band. It was their first Canadian show they ever did, and they hustled so hard. And they played this little room that was, I think, maybe 70 cap. There's like 200 people in there, and it was like the highlight of their whole entire tour. And all the photos they used for their next tour came from that event, and it made them look bigger and bigger and bigger. And they came back. Their next tour was bigger, and it was like. So I look at that band and it was like, what a critical piece I played in helping them, break in Southern Ontario kind of thing. So I like that strategy.
on that topic, like just give a shit about the show, promote it. It's not just show up and play. No matter how good you are, they're not going to remember you. They're going to remember if you did the promo before and after, thank yous, and then did you help out? Did you care? That's what stays. It's not always the performance.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
What's that?
Sure, yep. You can just ask them, and I'll just repeat it into the mic for the yep.
So one of my main problems with one of my main problems as an artist is that I'm often having problems trying to develop a network. I don't have that many connections. I often have trouble trying to build connections due to my disability. What is another way to succeed without having to develop that big network that everyone is talking about? Because I know it's impossible for some people, especially myself.
I think we heard that, yeah. Surround yourself with the people that can help you do that,
Yeah, I think.
right? Like I remember the first time I came in, you were shredding and, drumming, and I was like, this guy's clearly a shredder. He can, he can play really well. So if that's your strength, if you're an incredible musician, similar to the other conversation earlier, is that different people have different skill sets and different strengths, and that's the beauty of playing in a group and a band. So find people that can do that.
Right.
Are you able to go to shows?
Right, but my main problem has to do with finding other people, finding the other people to like you said, delegate some of the workload that I have, because I know for a fact that I can't afford, because I don't have the money to actually delegate the workload to some of the workload to the other people. I often end up having to do
All the things.
all these different things all by myself.
So there's actually some really great funding opportunities if you could explore the Ontario Arts Council. There's actually lots of great organizations that are here to help depending on the scope of however you identify with your disability. There's also some really great organizations in town like Vibrofusion Labs. I would give you David's contact. He does a lot of work in the deaf community, for example, and I'm not saying that but that he, for example, would be a really great person to help you navigate that. Not
He would
that
know where to go.
He would know where to go. There's lots of great people writing incredible grants in that scope. So those would be places that I would start if I were you, because then you would have some funding to be able to navigate, right? And say, okay, I need someone to help me do this, and I need someone to help me do that. But there's actually a lot of funding, and the Ontario Arts Council is really making sure that accessibility, no matter what the scope, is a big part of people's programming.
So Ontario.
Ontario Arts Council.
Yeah, and I will mention just, so there's the London Arts Council as well, and you can walk into the London Arts Council and actually get help with grant writing as well. So if you're applying to one of the bigger Ontario Arts Council or Canada Council for the Arts grants, the London Arts Council here in the city, they're really fantastic. You can just walk in the door and get people to help you with some of the grant writing too. So any other questions from the audience for them individually, or yep? Can I get you to pass that along there?
Hey, yeah, I really appreciated hearing everything. I have a question specifically for Richard. I'm wondering why exactly you decided to start your own label as opposed to maybe joining a label. Like, what advantages are to that, and what exactly is entailed in doing that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I should have elaborated on that a little bit more. So we were shopping around to other labels and stuff and looking at PR companies, and we just found that a lot of it, it's expensive to hire PR independently and do it all, and a lot of it's just hours, radio tracking, all that. You do your own work. And so I tried doing a lot of those little things myself, and I found I have a lot of skills that I can offer. So we'd consider ourselves more as a development label. We help bands that are kind of starting out, and I help them not make the mistakes I already made. And so it's a lot of experience. And when you're working with a bigger label, of course, they're going to be footing the bill for your development, PR, and stuff like that. I found in today's day and age, you don't need $100,000 like you used to make a record. You can make a record for $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, whatever. And a lot of bands, that's an attainable goal. So with my record label, we try to flip it upside down, where the band, we help them budget it out and get their record made under their band's budget. So the band's paying for the record, but we help with the PR, the promotions, the bookings, and the releases. And so it's more of a 20%, 80% split back in the day, where the artist was trying to pay back the label over their whole career for what the label invested in them. Because at the end of the day, it is an investment. You can make a record on a credit card, but you shouldn't, but you can. But that's the thing. So, because with the cost of recordings, as you all know, nowadays, home studios and pop-up studios, stuff like that, it's cheaper to make recordings and at a quality level. So once you find someone who can do those skills, that's kind of what I do, is I help bands make budgets and do their albums cheap. So that's where I help out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for them individually or as a group? Yep.
Another question for the guy with the hat specifically.
Richard.
Sorry. So you did say that you have those things you can offer. So how are you able to get into a position where you were able to offer those things, and for other people who are looking to start their own record label, what are the tips you can suggest? What are the connections you can suggest?
Okay, so the tips is start yesterday. So the biggest thing is that I'd been making records for years and I just didn't realize it, but essentially what I was doing was what a record label does. And when we've only been public for about 7 months, 8 months, and we found that it was a big need in the city. We've had a lot of people approach us about ways to help them, and you'll find the community comes to you in that kind of sense. Well, we've always been out in the community. And so after, it takes years of experience, that's the biggest thing, and we're still very small, just developing, and I don't call myself an expert in anything really. But I'd say just start it and see what happens. We were fortunate enough to have Leap help us, give us that good push, so there you go. Yeah.
I just want to jump in. Richard has mentioned a couple times the LEAP program. So LEAP Junction offers a summer incubator program for entrepreneurs. It's a 9-week program, and Richard was part of that program last year. So we have our cohort for this summer, but it could be something that you're looking at in future years. So it is paid. You get some money to be part of that. You do have to have the idea or the business far enough along that we can actually help you out for that 9 weeks. And we are open to grads as well. So you don't have to be a current student. It could be something you come back to us for. But again, I'm going to say a little bit more about some of the information you can grab about Leap Junction. But again, that networking, I really want to make sure that you know what's available to you right here on campus as well. And Richard's a good one to talk to in terms of, and Savanah used to work for us too. So, so yeah, definitely Leap is one of the places that can help you out. I've got about 10 more minutes for questions. I've got one here, and if there's a few others, then we'll end off with that.
So I had a question for Carly, and it's about how do you manage talent if it's just you individually in a band? So I've had experience with hiring and firing people as I see fit.
So I do it based on if I'm recording or if I'm playing gigs. So for that reason, if I hire someone, I usually know right away, and the biggest part of that is a personality thing, I think. If you can work with people, if they're committed, if they're into it, if you're talking about telling someone this isn't going to work out, then you pretty much just have to say it that way. This isn't really going to work out, but thank you so much, kind of thing. But it's like a process of finding the right people, and yeah, does that kind of answer it? I don't know.
Yes.
Cool.
I mean, if you're also paying people, it's kind of
Yeah, it's
nice
easier
because
if
you're
you-
in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And you
Essentially
just
contract
never pay them
work.
again.
Yeah.
Never
Right, exactly.
call them again.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
thank you for this job. Have a
Nice
good
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
My other question is more about the writing process, and specifically for Carly, but anyone can jump in. When you're writing, and you mentioned that you'll sit down and kind of do a 5-hour writing session or something. I'm sure you found this where you're writing a song, you're kind of maybe, I'm not just feeling this, but I really want to push through and kind of see where this can go, but you're kind of just being like, oh, like I just want to leave this song, whatever. What are things that you do to kind of help push yourself and stay on that and like chase that song and keep going on?
Sometimes I look at it as like that. There's so many songs that I've written and kind of gotten near the end of where I just kind of know I will never share this song. But for me, it's just a matter of I did the work today. So, yeah, I guess, and I don't know. Like there's some days that it's harder than others, but it's just kind of powering through. And then I find for me, like I think it's a different process for everyone maybe, but the more I sit with something and kind of play through stuff, maybe the 7th or 8th or 100th time I play through it, that's when I'm like, whoa, there's the bridge, or there's this part. So it's, for me, I've learned along the way, and that the time you put in is so important. Even if you don't think, even if you don't have anything that you can share in that day of work, you sat down and you did the work. So.
Can I jump in too? I think
Yeah.
the creativity part is kind of a skill. So when you're scheduling it every day, whether it's scheduled or not, if you're doing it every day, I think is the important part, because you're developing that part of your brain that when you actually have something you really like, all the other building blocks are there. Like, I've done this part of it, I've done this part of it, and then it comes together. It's just like kind of learning an instrument the same way. You need those fundamentals for when you get to the bigger project. Everything kind of lines up. So I was creative Monday to Thursday, and I have little sparks of it. Then all of a sudden I get that big eureka on Friday
Yeah,
for the
for
song.
sure.
Because those first 4 days were shit. But
Yeah.
the last day is where it kind of paid off. My subconsciously was kind of developing, right?
And I find doing all the other stuff that I have to do on a daily basis, I end up losing my creative time, and that's actually been happening to me lately. So I've actually carved out more time for myself now that's not playing shows and stuff to create, because I want to be recording a new album. And so I think getting that on a schedule has really been helpful for me to kind of do that, because there's so much else that you have to do, and you have to remember that, like, wait, I want to create good work. So that's where I've sort of shifted my priority in that now, and look at kind of the year, and like the next couple months is that for me.
I think it's worth mentioning, too, we were talking about grants and things like that. There are grants available, London Arts Council and Ontario Arts Council, so you can actually pay yourself to create. And I know when I was first starting off, I received, even if it's a couple $1,000s, where I can say, okay, I can not work, I cannot worry about having to pay my bills, I can actually use this funding to help me carve out time to create. And then you sort of have 6 months, or, I mean, not every single day, but a chunk of funding available for that. I see Annette's hand up, so I just want to.
Oh yeah, the Factor. So if you guys, Factor has an artist development grant, which is great for any starting artist or band, which gives you, I think it's a year, and they give you $2,000 to create a demo or just show that I've been developing as an artist. So if you don't have that cash to go into the studio, but you got a full track or full amount of songs, that's the perfect grant, and it's not very complicated. But it takes a little bit of time.
Starting point.
Yeah, and once you start doing that, because they force you to make a plan for your band. We're not just going to keep playing shows. We're just going to tour out west. Don't just tour out west. Terrible ideas. Like
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
Those resources are available too. If you go to londonmusicoffice.com/resources, you can see all those granting organizations are laid out there for you.
Yes, Cory, we were having a little technical difficulty, so you were going to put the website up. So, sorry, can
Yeah.
you repeat the web address again?
Yeah, londonmusicoffice.com, and then I think it's /resources. So where you find that. But you can navigate through, and there's some other pieces there to check out.
Cool. Got one last question, and I just want to, two last questions. Annette, did you want to jump in one more time there?
I have a question. It was actually Sarah that was here. I want to make sure I asked it, and you guys did talk about, the difference between, pro bono and then being paid. I do want you to talk a little bit about that in terms of, making sure that this becomes a paid thing for you. I mean, you have to earn it. You have to do good work. But I think the other thing is, as you move up, remember that you need to pay too. So not only do you have to get paid, but you have to remember that.
It's a two-way street.
It's a two-way.
Yeah.
So as you become successful, and as all of you guys are up here, you got to remember, and we do pro bono work all our life. Like even when we start to make money and we're doing things,
Of course.
you pick it. And I've said this to many of the students I've mentored. Figure out how much time you can actually dedicate to pro bono work, and say, okay, this is going to be it. I'm going to make this my thing, and I'm going to really push that. But I have finding the balance, I think, and whether that becomes a volunteer gig down the road, whatever it is you're doing. Anyway, I just think we need to make sure we do that.
That's a good question, or a good statement that you're saying that it goes both ways. So now, you know, you're getting paid as a musician, and you're squeezing a friend to do artwork for you. You gotta kind of turn that favor around too, right? Because it's important to help and support those people that have helped you along the way. And I think that's a really good point. That once you start getting something, start getting support, start getting financing, that's for you to pay forward as well too, right? Like there's opportunities there for you to help other people grow. So I think that's a really strong point.
Well, and I was so used to doing events with no budget and no money and just taking the full risk off the ticket sales, right? And then paying bands and paying my production people and everything. So now when I get events with a budget, it's amazing because I'm like, okay, you're getting paid, you get a car, and you're getting a car. Not really. Yeah. But, you know, I'm very happy and excited to give everybody what they're worth. And, you know, like...
Feels good.
Yeah, it feels good. You can run through the industry standards. Like for a musician, what is
Your
it?
first event's going to be out of pocket. That's just...
Yeah. Anyways, yes.
And I think the other thing too is we talk about it a lot at Leap with other entrepreneurs, but kind of being creative in some of those ways. So if you are doing some pro bono stuff, but maybe you have a creative way of linking it to something else that you're passionate about, or you know, you have a band member or something that's passionate. So maybe every year, you know, you do this one gig and it's maybe around something around mental health or something like that, and you do that gig for free, but it becomes something that everybody knows your band is involved with, and then they start to invest in your band because they know that you're, you know, paying it forward through this one thing. Or maybe if you're, you know, you have a side thing and you want to teach, you know, maybe you're offering some free music lessons and you're doing that work pro bono, but it actually helps the band grow and it helps other people be interested because you're doing some really awesome work. So that can actually be some of the behind the scenes stuff that happens in terms of helping you make money, but it's not the actual thing that makes you the money. So if you want to say your question, and then I'll come back up at the top for the last one there.
One last question for all four of you. What's the biggest click moment that you had that taught you the biggest lesson that you learned, and what was the biggest lesson that you learned?
Good question.
I think for me, I was just trying to be like as real a person as you can, and you know, having it was an agent I was having an issue with kind of thing, and I talked to somebody else sort of about the situation. They kind of helped coach me through it, and the advice they said, it was just like, just be straight up.
Yeah.
Be completely candid with them. I mean, if this is the challenge you're facing, it's going to come to a head at some point. Don't beat around the bush, just really just sort of get to it, and here's the challenge that we're facing kind of thing. Is this going to work? Can we get over this? As opposed to dealing with it day of and surprising somebody, right? And then dealing with that person exploding on you kind of thing. It's you know, set people up for their expectation, and sort of have that communication. Let people know what's going on. Communication is I think a really important piece, and it's something still I think I work on. But communication and expectation.
For me, I had an aha moment when when I was out in Vancouver. Music has always been a part of me and very much a huge part of my life. But it took me quite a while to realize that I could actually be successful and do it more as a living. So I spent a lot of years just like, you know, like working and playing and kind of like waiting for it to kind of unravel instead of taking it seriously and being like, wait, I can do this. And it was actually coming back to London, and I met people who were full-time working musicians, and I was like, oh, this is possible to do this. Like this is... And it sounds really simple, but it really did take me a while to get there. And since I've been taking it seriously and putting all my efforts into that, so many doors have opened. I've got some amazing opportunities. And it was actually my friend Sarah Smith. I don't know if you know Sarah Smith, and meeting her, and she was like, I was like, I would love to tour. I would love to do that. How is that even something that I could do? And she was like, well, why not? And 2 years later, I'd done like 3 tours, and it starts small and it gets bigger, and each one you learn as you go. And then the other aha that I had is going back to putting value on music. The more value you put on yourself, the more respect you get. And I've just found that. And I've found in saying no a little bit more, I'm getting the better opportunities and I'm getting the better gigs, I guess. And knowing, you know, when something's going to be good for your career, and it's not like it's all about, you know, making money, but if you do want to be serious and make a living at it, it is. You have to really think about that. Like,
put food on the table.
Yeah.
Pay your rent.
yeah. So putting value on yourself and having enough confidence to do that. Yeah.
In 2014, I got a phone call to work TIFF in Toronto, and I was very scared. And they asked me to be a production manager on like a pretty big piece of the festival because TIFF has many facets to it. And I didn't think I could do it. And the fact that my name had sort of been passed around the office and I got a phone call was sort of that click, like, oh, I guess my reputation has gone somewhere outside of London. So that was pretty remarkable. It was to date the hardest thing I've ever done. But because I took that gig and I basically, like, even during it was like riddled with anxiety the entire time, it got me some pretty remarkable opportunities through that. But even getting to that phone call, I had been working for so long to sort of, you know, keep my, whatever, do my work. Yeah, so.
So I told you I write down every gig. Well, I remember 3-4 years ago messaging festivals like Supercrawl and Riverfest and friggin' everything I could, and you know, you get the thanks for applying and stuff. And then last year I looked at my tour schedule and I'd played some of the festivals that 5 years ago I would have had no thought I would have played, and I was like, oh shit, something's working. I don't know what, but you see those little building blocks and you're like, okay, well, this is how it goes. Last year we played this festival, next year we'll play this festival, hopefully next year we'll get another bigger gig and stuff like that. So you kind of just got to look to what you've done, be happy with it.
All right, awesome. I think we have final question up here.
I feel a little bit awkward, this being the final question, but being a female in the music industry, it can be tough sometimes. I had a little bit of experience. I did an internship for a year, and when I was like mopping the floor, somebody was saying, "Oh, you're the hottest janitor I've seen." And so it's like there's there's constantly things, and I would continue to say more, but there are things I don't want to say on this mic that have been said to me, and I just am curious how you handle those situations and what you do. Like, do you stand up, or do you just turn around? And also, when those people who are saying those things to you are like big names in the music industry, and you want to be respectful back towards them, but they've just said something really terrible to you. So how do you deal with that?
I try to make sure that I have a network of other women in the industry that I can talk about that with and start making changes, and it starts small. And I didn't used to say things, but now I'm pretty, just comes with experience, you know, I'm not afraid to kind of stand up, but yeah, it happens a lot.
Oh man, yeah. So
as an organizer, how do you?
Yeah, this is an ongoing conversation. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think, however, we're in an interesting time. One of the positives, of course, of this call-out culture that we live in is that people are getting called out and their bullshit is now out in the forefront. And there's been many examples in the music industry, but it doesn't matter what industry. So that is a positive to know that people are starting to get called out, because for a long time, I didn't realize that it wasn't okay. Like, it just happened, and so you just deal with it, and you're like, oh, that's just part of what it is. I just have to grow thick skin because this is what I do for a living. But the reality is that, no, you don't have, I mean, it is important to have thick skin to a certain extent, but it's not okay. And so, you know, if you are experiencing these things, having folks that you can rely on and lean on is really important. But also, I understand when you're starting out, you don't have that. So it's kind of like, well, who do I even talk to? I've had so many situations. I've had to file complaints on, you know, IATSE, and I've had to file complaints on certain, you know, like stagehands, you know, whatever, the list goes on and on. But I was certainly not comfortable doing that in my early days by any means, because like I said, I just thought that came with the territory. I have learned how to speak up. Obviously, I'm pretty opinionated, but that also took a long time for me to feel confident in front of a bunch of crew guys who are way older than me to tell them off. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but it is important that if, for example, for me now when I work on an event, I try to find the other women who are on site and recognize where they're at, even if it's someone who is the volunteer coordinator and I'm over in artist relations, just to kind of know that there's other people on site. If I have to talk to somebody, I try to, you know, connect with them and say, this just happened to me, what do you think I should do, kind of a thing.
I think we should also
yeah.
ask the men in the room. Like the men in the room
Yeah.
have to be
Yeah.
I think
our
it's
allies
and I think it's
call it out. You know,
great.
Like,
It's not an awkward question to end it with. I think it's actually a really good question
Yeah.
to end it
Yeah.
with, and it's very now.
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It's
this is
relevant
an-
for sure.
This is an issue that's been happening, and I think just someone addressing it,
Yeah.
even if it's like Savanah said, sometimes you feel like the conversation's not going anywhere. But I think the fact that you're talking about it, it is. And I don't think there's a person in this room now that isn't thinking about how what they're saying is going to affect somebody else now. I think 5
'Cause
years
it's
ago that
everyone's
wasn't the
issue.
case.
Like,
Yeah.
And I think, like the Me Too movement did something that the political world couldn't do or the corporate culture couldn't do, right? So I think it's an important conversation to have, and it's something that, as males that we all definitely need to think about. And it's something, it makes people feel uncomfortable, right? I
Yeah.
think everyone sort of feels that, and it's a good thing to feel, right? It's a good thing to feel, to know that change is happening. Change happens through that awkward, uncomfortable feeling, right? And the more we have these conversations, the more comfortable we feel with it. So it's an important thing to have, and it's an important thing to think about, and I don't think it's an awkward question to end the day on.
I think it's another thing to add that it's actually really important to keep in mind that we never know what people truly are. Like the
True.
so-called honest answer could be actually like someone who's been active in the music industry. We wouldn't know that for certain, and that's the big thing we should keep in mind.
I think it comes back, again, you're saying it's totally not an awkward question to end on. I think it comes back to all of, full circle almost, in terms of like how we're dealing with those relationships. So even being able to call out band members or something like that, the people closest to us, but also how we're, every day looking at those relationships and looking at those actions and things that we say, and how it all, comes full circle. So can I get a huge round of applause to the four of them, Richard, Savanah, Carly, and Cory, for coming. Thank you all for coming, and I'm assuming that they did leave you with some nuggets of knowledge. Can I also get a round of applause to Cory and Romeo, who are doing the tech for us? Mics and things like that. I'm not sure if any of them have to run away right yet, but if you do have any questions and you want to ask them, feel free. And we do have some information about Leap Junction as well, so if you want to come down, we do have some cards that you can take with you. So thanks again.